We've been speaking thus far and reflecting on gospel relationships with each other and others, with gospel mission of going forth. Now, we get to chapters 18 and 19. I think there are two characteristics of both, the relationships and the mission. Chapter 18 refers to the early practice of holding chapters. That is, regular gatherings of the brothers. And these chapters flow into their Catholic identity as found in chapter 19. The two go together. The brothers do not go out into the world simply as individuals, but rather as members of a broader fraternity in communion with the assembly of God's people, the church. As they go forth, they are to stay connected with their own brothers by periodic gatherings or chapters, and then additionally in their participation within the broader church. The former, the practice of chapters, has a long tradition in Western monasticism. The monks, like the brothers who come after them, found chapters as a way to forge their identity in shared communion, a shared communion to treat the things of God. The latter, in being Catholics, they do in three ways. In identity or manner of being, in the way they live, and in the way they speak. Turning now back to chapter 3 of Joy of the Gospel, in part 4 of that chapter, Pope Francis articulates why these two chapters of the earlier rule are important. Chapters and being Catholic. And he underlines this by stressing the importance of what he calls spiritual accompaniment when going forth to preach the gospel. He says no one can do it alone. And so he argues the church must yet urgently develop what he calls the art of accompaniment. Lest, he says, we become drifters or homeless in gospel mission. Without regular companions on the journey to discuss the things of God, we never learned the first requirement of mission, namely, docility to the Spirit of God. In chapters, the brothers, or anyone in spiritual accompaniment, learns to practice the art of listening, which the Pope writes is simply more than hearing. He continues, it is only in compassionate listening that the heart opens up and makes possible that closeness without which there can be no spiritual encounter. This is simply necessary, he writes. Missionary disciples accompany missionary disciples. Precisely from this, the necessity of being Catholic flows. To be Catholic is fundamentally and primarily to desire ever deeper communion with the Spirit of the Lord in the body of Christ. The believer, writes the Pope, is essentially one who remembers. The Catholic dimension of this is to share in the memory that makes us present to a great cloud of witnesses. This is the kind of memory that is based on remembrance, the remembrance Jesus leaves us in the Eucharist, which draws us ever more deeply into that event of his Passover. Out of this Catholic way of remembering, the Gospels themselves emerge. Deeper understanding of the teaching and footprints of Jesus in the Gospel ever increases in the shared, grateful remembrance at the heart of the Eucharist. It integrates us in our Gospel lives more intimately with the great cloud of witnesses. So according to St. Francis and Pope Francis, gospel mission does not move out of a privatized or individualistic spirituality. Rather, it is out of communion, out of spiritual accompaniment within the context of the fraternity in chapters and in communion with the rest of the church. That is, living, being, and speaking as Catholics, do they genuinely go forth in the world to share the gospel?